I'm Wilson Patrick.
And I'm Cruz Cotton.
And this is the Posterity Podcast,
where we share stories, knowledge, and other treasures and plant good seeds in the hearts of men.
Our agenda is found in the book of John, same agenda the Apostle John had when he said, the reason I've written this is so that you might believe, and that in believing you would have life in his name. That's what we want to do. We want to tell others about Jesus so that you too might believe.
Yes. So we're going to go ahead and get started and ask the questions?
Yeah, let's ask the questions. So we're going to introduce this podcast. We wanted to kind of introduce ourselves and kind of let you know why we're doing this podcast. So we're going to kind of alternate some questions here. And so let's get started.
All right, so I guess I'll start and I'll ask Wilson the questions first. So the first question is, what does the name of this podcast mean?
Google it. No, I'm kidding. So the name of the podcast, Posterity, means all future generations or all generations to follow. And the reason I chose that name is because I was thinking, when I was thinking about this podcast, well before you and I got together on it, I really wanted to get the story of my dad and how my dad got saved, because it's such an awesome story, and I tell people about it all the time. But he was on drugs. There's a lot of situations on his life till he was 19 years old when God really spoke to him, and I wanted my kids to be able to know that story and get it from him firsthand. And so it hit me that I wanted to record his story for posterity, or for the future generations, specifically within my own family.
Yeah.
And then it hit me out that would be kind of a cool podcast.
Yeah.
Recording stories that you want to record for posterity. And so that's where the name came from and why this is called the Posterity Podcast.
Yeah. Posterity means all future generations.
Yes.
So
how old are you?
I am 15 years old. So.
Okay. So Cruz, you're 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Why in the world would you not be terrified to start a podcast?
Well, I guess it's because I have my own YouTube channel. So I'm comfortable in front of the camera. And I think the YouTube channel is definitely from the Lord preparing me for this moment. So I really, truly believe that. And I guess it's just nothing to be afraid of.
Right. Well, when we first got together, I think I suggested that we do a podcast. Mm-hmm. It was probably, I don't know how long ago it was.
Like a year.
Maybe
probably.
A year ago. And I just kind of said it one time. But then when we started talking about the Lord and doing some discipleship stuff together, one of the questions that I asked was, what can we do with what we've been given? And the thought hit me about you that Cruz should really do something on YouTube or do something through a podcast. And so I just prayed and I said, Lord, if you want me to do something with Cruz, with his skill set, podcast, YouTube, whatever, then will you let him approach me about it? Yeah. And so I did mention it to you about a year earlier. And then I'm sitting on the couch one night. It's probably 2 months after kind of whispering that prayer, and I get a text from Cruz saying, hey, we really need to start a podcast to share the gospel. Yeah. And I was like, well, that prayer got answered, and yes, I'll be a part of it. You know? So that was really cool. So kind of going back a little bit, what would you say your hobbies are?
My hobbies are definitely filmmaking. And so filmmaking, probably number one. And then number two would be flips. So I think those are my
What do you mean by flips?
Flips like gymnastics, basically. So. And
you record yourself doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how many hits has your last video got in the last 12 days?
So my last video that I uploaded, it wasn't even about flips. It was like my first one that I ever uploaded. That was about filmmaking. And right now it's sitting at about 26,000. So.
Wow. And, and you've picked up how many subscribers in the last 12 days?
Right now I'm at 1.1 thousand. And so I was at 200.
You're wrong. I looked earlier. It's 1.5.
It's 1.5, really?
Yeah, it is.
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's pretty awesome.
So 1.5, and before I posted that video, I was at 230. So,
wow.
No, I wasn't at 230. I was at 300.
300.
So I'm gonna let you do that math.
Yeah, I hear you. Well,
I'm homeschooled.
I hear you. Well, I thought it was so cool because, and I've told you this, one of the fun things that I used to do would be video editing, and I literally spent about 40 hours making one graphic. And I kid you not, it may have been more than that. Making one graphic, it was a 5-second intro. And I realized how much work and how many YouTube videos I had to watch to get to that point where I could do that. And then I come in and I see Cruz, and you were showing me something at church one day, and you're like, hey, I made this video. And I remember thinking, he's almost as good as I am, and he's only 14 or 13 or however old you were. And then fast forward maybe a year later, you're showing me stuff, and it's like, man, I could never even. I have friends that are in radio, TV, and film, and they're not even at his level at 15 years old. I mean, literally, it is freakish, if that's the word. It's amazing. And so I've even told your dad, because I work out with Cruz's dad. I've even told him, I'm like, just keep fanning this, like keep fanning. I'm telling you, this is a career. This is something God has for him. Yeah. And I know your parents agree with that.
Oh, so. Yeah. What are the plans for the podcast? Like, what's the next like things that you have planned for the podcast?
So, of course, it's not just me, it's both of us. But I'll say that for me, I really want to get the story of my dad next. And then I've got a few other people that I really want us to interview. And for the podcast, I always want to end it in a way where we can clearly share the gospel and show Christ from different areas of the Bible, maybe even from Genesis 1. How does Christ play into this, all the way through the book of Revelation, and just give little nuggets of the gospel hidden throughout the Bible, Old Testament, and then revealed in the New Testament. And what does that look like? Paul defines the gospel in Corinthians, and he says that the gospel that I preach to you is the death, the burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so that is the summation of the Christian gospel, that Christ came, he died for our sins, but that not that he just died, but that he was resurrected from the grave. And so that's the good news that we carry, that we have, and that's the good news that we want this podcast to exhibit, to share with the world. And we have a much wider audience being able to do that through this podcast than I do as a custom home builder in the place where I live, Andalusia. So.
Yeah, so that's the goal for this podcast, is for it not to just be about us. It needs to be about the Lord and sharing the gospel, because that's the main thing that really matters. It's
Absolutely.
not us.
Absolutely.
So.
Are you nervous? Speaking of that, it doesn't need to be about us. Are you nervous that this podcast could become self-serving?
That's something that I've been praying about. I really don't want it to become self-serving. So, I mean, it's human nature. So I obviously have a little bit of fear of that. But I feel like we have our heads in the right place, and we have our eyes on the prize, and we don't want to hear, you did a good job in person. We want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, whenever we die. So
Amen.
That's the goal in life. So we're going to try our hardest not to become self-centered about this.
Absolutely. And I guess my other question is, and I don't even know that I've asked you this directly, and if I have, I just forgot, but why did you choose me to be a part? You could do this on your own. Why did you choose me to be a part of this podcast?
Well, whenever we started doing the discipleship with Ian, I really like all the stories that you have. You have so much like interesting stories. And so I just like that he'd be really good on a podcast. And you also mentioned it to me like a year ago. So I was like, something that he said he wanted to do, and he'd be like a really good podcast host. So I just asked you if you wanted to do it.
Well, thank you. I'm super excited about it.
Oh yeah, me too.
I wish I had your video skills to be able to do it in times past, but I know God definitely linked us up, and I'm excited about what the future holds. So what do you do now? So you're 15 years old. You don't have a driver's license. You have a permit, right?
Yes.
And what are you doing as far as a job?
So for my job that I have, there's a videographer in the area, and I work for him. I I edit his weddings. I edit his sports videos. I go out and shoot weddings with him, and so I just do that, and I get paid minimum wage, and it's fun.
Right. And of course, the learning is the most important thing of that
Yes,
whole
yes.
thing. But
It's also something to do. Like I'd just be sitting at home if I wasn't
right, doing schoolwork and then being bored. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what has he seen about you? I know you're not. It's going to sound like you're self-serving here, but I'm asking you, so you have to say it. What has he said about some of the videos that you've edited at your age?
Yeah, so he told me whenever he saw my first like real video that I made for him, he was like, I've hired people in Texas, I've hired people in India, all across. No one has done a better job than you at making these videos for me in my style. And so I was like, thank you.
Yeah,
Can I get a raise?
I know exactly. No, what I felt like was when I saw, I've had enough experience doing it. It was my fun thing to do: Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects, Illustrator, all the different programs that you could use, and I realized how complicated they are, and I've probably spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 hours worth of videos trying to figure out how to do things, and even with my 200 hours, I cannot even touch the knowledge that you have at 15. So I know it's a gift. It's a God-given gift. And so it's amazing to see that you're using that gift for his glory. That's what it comes down to, is seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added. When I hear the word seek, I think agenda. Jesus would often ask people, what do you seek? And it'd be like blind Bartimaeus. And he'd say, that my sight would be restored. And so he'd heal the blind person. He was asking them basically, what is your agenda? And so when it says seek first the kingdom, we should think agenda. Our agenda should be to be about God's kingdom. And with that, all these other things will be added. And so right now you're using that agenda, that seek first agenda, with the skills that he's given you, and so that's really important. A lot of us think that we have to go to seminary if we want to do any ministry, or we have to, do all these things to get qualified to be able to do it, when God is the qualifier, and he used a bunch of fishermen to literally turn the world upside down. So how much more can he use us in our skill and ability, where we are? And if we'll catch on to that, then we'll realize that we'll be out in the fields, we'll be out in the streets, we'll be everywhere, we'll be on the internet, and we can reach people where we are in the talent that God's given us.
Yeah, that's one thing that William Worley, the youth pastor at First Baptist, says. He says, like, God turned the world around, he turned the world around with 12, really 11 people, because of Judas. And imagine how much impact we could do in our hometown with the 40 people that attend the Wednesday night churches.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's living it outside of the four walls. Like, Jesus went into the streets. He went to the synagogues. He went into the temple. Everywhere he went, there was healing. There was the manifest presence of God. And so if Christ lives in us, then wherever we go and whoever we're around, there should be an effect on the society. And we're compared to salt and light. Light illuminates, salt preserves. We're supposed to be that agent here in America, in our hometown. And so just to see people that kind of grab onto that at 15 years old, I'm 36. I wish I had that at your age. So it's amazing.
How can people support our podcast?
You can watch it.
Yeah.
I don't know other ways that they can support it. Do you have?
They could subscribe, I guess.
Oh, subscribe. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Subscribe.
Yeah, please subscribe. Thank you.
Tell me about how you have used your job to share the gospel.
Yeah, so I am a custom home builder. I do not own the company. I basically run the company for the owner, and best boss in the world, by the way. Shout out to Jeremy. And anyway, and I also run a roofing company, and we just started that too. But I have realized that we don't get to take anything with us, but I'm on a job site with a bunch of people that need a lot of help. Not all of them, but a good amount of them um, could have drug issues or pretty rough past because it's a bunch of subcontractors. And so what I've realized is that at some level we're paying them, and I can't with a client most of the time have a lot of conversation just because there's a conflict of interest there. But typically with the subcontractor, I can go in there, I'll buy them lunch, and while they're eating lunch, I'll say, hey, since I bought you lunch, you have to listen to me for a few minutes. And I'll preach the gospel, make myself available, tell them my story, tell them the story of how my dad got saved, and then say, God's real. He's really got a plan for your life. And if you'll turn to him, he'll take where you are right now and make you a completely new person and a new creation. And I just offer that to them. And there's no pressure for them to, I mean, I would love for every single one of them to like ask Jesus into their heart right then. Yeah. I've had a couple that, even one recently that texted me one Friday night and said, I just asked Jesus into my heart. Just wanted to let you know, like, I'm saved. He took 50 years of pain away. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. But not every single one is like that. And so I look at it that we are the seed planters, and we're trying to plant good seed wherever we go. And that seed in the Bible is called the incorruptible seed, meaning it can lie dormant for years and years and years. But once it gets watered and it springs forth, then all those seeds that were planted can bring forth that produce, that harvest that God's looking for. And so our job is to be seed scatterers wherever we go. But we can't choose what type of ground it lands on or what kind of heart it lands on. Some is going to be stony heart. Some is going to be, good ground. But we have to continue to scatter seed. And so we need to figure out where we are with the level of influence we have. How can we be seed scatterers in the field that we're in, not trying to get to another field? God has you here now, not saying that you can't go on the mission field somewhere or something like that, but there are people in front of you every day. And if you'll take every day, one day at a time, and have that seek first agenda when you go out to the job site or anywhere else, you'll never know how many people God will use you to plant seed, sometimes water seed, and sometimes you'll see the increase immediately. Sometimes you'll see years and years and years of working with somebody, letting them see how you live your life, letting them see how you treat them. It all works together for them to hopefully come to the knowledge of Jesus and have a believing heart.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, Cruz, how should we end this?
Thank you guys for watching. We're going to have more podcasts to come. I hope you enjoyed it, and share it with your friends and family. If that's a good way to support us. And I guess we'll see you in the next one.
And please subscribe.
Yeah.
Let's do gun fingers to leave. You can cut that.
Goodbye.